everyone. My name is Leah Pletcher, and I am a team member of the EVERFI from Blackbaud organization. And just going to do some quick intros, and then we'll dive into the good conversation here. But overall, really, really honored to be here among these ladies and then among all of you. I'm a Metro Detroit native, worked for the Detroit Red Wings Foundation previously, have had my hand in minor league sports organizations, and just really, really have a passion for the impact that sport can make on an individual, on a community, and just feel honored to have a role that also allows me to take advantage of the power of really, really great brands that are purpose-driven. So overall, that's a little bit about me. Let me turn it over to these ladies.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Danielle Cook. I am the senior manager on our corporate partnerships on the engagement side. Been here for about like 2.5 seasons, 2.5 years, about 3 seasons. Been working in partnerships for a few years, went from the brand side, then switched over to professional sports, and went back to the brand side, then came back to professional sports. So worked with a lot of really cool brands, Gymshark, if anyone's ever heard of it, Adidas, Under Armour, worked with the Philadelphia Eagles for a little bit in partnerships, and then now with the Pistons.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bridget Sponsky. I am the Executive Director of Brand and Sponsorship Marketing over at Ally. I've been there 16 years. Came over to actually rebrand the company 16 years ago from GMAC, and it's been amazing to see sort of the culture that we've driven over that journey. But prior to that was on the advertising side of things. I am a Detroit native as well. Spent some time at the agencies across the board working on the automotive business, so deeply ingrained there, and I'm really happy to be here today.
All right, and now let's get into it. So would you each mind just really sharing the influence that you personally have seen being able to bring the female perspective to the table with branding conversations, especially in the sports industry, which historically has been so male-dominated?
I don't know how familiar everybody in the audience is with Ally and sort of our work in the sponsorship world, specifically with women's sports. But to your question about being a female in the business, I have a lot of examples, I think, of the difference that I think has been created within not just the industry, but also some of the ways that brands that I've worked on have been executing against initiatives because of a female perspective at the table. But I think one of the most relevant examples to kind of share is our work in women's sports. And about 4 years ago, we were kind of in a position of sponsorship diversification in terms of our portfolio. We actually, for a period of time, were precluded from doing any sort of sponsorships because we were part of the TARP recipients when the Great Recession was taking place. And we were just in the same boat as a lot of other Detroiters. So we were in this position to really look at our partnership and sponsorship portfolio in 2020 and realized while we have slowly started to become partners of NASCAR through the HMS relationship, with Charlotte FC through our MLS relationship, those were really done because not only of the power of sponsorship and its efficiency and kind of knowing what we all in this room know, but because it gave us a presence amongst a larger audience from a brand awareness standpoint and also in the communities that we work in, and it was an investment in our communities. What we needed to do was think about how are we broadening that reach, and are we really speaking to women consumers, and why don't we have women's sports in our portfolio? So it wasn't because we started to ride this wave of women's sports. We were very thoughtful about that and methodical about that with the NWSL. And so we got into a relationship with the NWSL in 2020, but that's because I had female leaders at the table. So I had myself, I had my boss, I had a team, actually one who's here today, of female leaders at the table to make those decisions. And fast forward, 2 years from then, that's when our 50-50 pledge was born. And just for context, what that is we made a pledge that over the next 5 years, for every dollar that we spent in men's sports media, we would spend that same dollar in women's sports media. And that was born because we understood that media is the largest revenue driver in sports. And how are we going to gain women equity if we don't start to make a stance, if we don't blink? And so without that female perspective at the table, those things would have never happened for us. And we're seeing those outsized returns, not just for our brand, but for the industry. So it's been absolutely incredible.
Go ahead, Danielle.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And, like I personally get to work with Ally. They are one of our great partners here at the Pistons. But I think I'm going to take it from a different perspective and talk about, just the mentorship that women bring to the table and being able to advocate for other women, whether it's in the business or whether it's interns or just, we have high school students that come through here. We mentor. I love to mentor. And so being able to kind of like bring my perspective and bring my expertise and my ideas to the table and also advocate for our younger employees, our younger staff members, and being able to push them and to pull the creativity out of them. Like our chief marketing officer is a woman. Being able to, knowing that like she brings great ideas from a different perspective, from a feminine perspective, and sometimes, hey guys, we didn't think about this, but also advocating and pushing those that are underneath her. I've seen that as well. So I'm glad that I get to bring that to the table. And then also just, again, pulling that creativity out. Like the Detroit Pistons is a very progressive organization. And then from a brand perspective too. So all the creativity is from having all of those different minds sitting at the table, and having that female mind sitting at the table, I think has really pushed us forward.
I love it. The trailblazing efforts here are incredible and impeccable. Are there any lessons learned throughout your careers and working with so many of these influential brands that you would, I think about how it impacts your approach in working? I know that you shared a little bit more of just having those women at the table to think about that, but anything else that you could share there of lessons learned and maybe things that you apply?
So many lessons through over the years. I think when I started my career, my first, I call it my big girl job, was with Adidas, working in account marketing. And I was so new, so fresh, very green, eyes wide open. And just being able to kind of sit under the leadership of some folks, that I was under at Adidas, kind of changed my perspective on the sports industry. But then just kind of bumping your head, making mistakes, taking that along the way. But I want to say the biggest lesson that I learned was to always be yourself, be very authentic. I think anyone that I do work with, and shout out to the Pistons that are in here, I'm 100% myself all the time. You're going to get Danielle no matter what. But I've noticed that it makes people feel comfortable when I bring my authentic self to the table. In terms of like with my partners, it makes them feel comfortable as well. I've built really great relationships just from me being a human, being myself, and being able to empathize with them on different things. So being 100% yourself and bringing your authentic self to the table, I think is probably the biggest lesson that I've learned and that I implement daily.
I can empathize with that, and I think I'll expand on that a little bit too from my perspective. Is I think a lot of just females in general in business have some sort of sense of imposter syndrome, on the spectrum somewhere. But I think that figuring out that you don't have to be somebody that you're not that's a gem. And if you can harness that and you can be comfortable with who you are in your own skin and with your own personality and what your strengths are that you bring to the table, that's when you can really affect change. And I've had to learn that throughout my career. But I know you had asked about what have we seen too with partners. And I mean, I'll give Danielle and her team a lot of props, because one of the things I feel like I learned anyway at a very young age, is that deeds speak louder than words. And that's not just true in your personal life. It's not just true with your family and your friends. It's true in business. And that's really how we look at a lot of our partnerships. Is for us, it is not about fulfilling assets. And this has been sort of this learning along my career journey, is that asset fulfillment is one thing, but when you're actually doing deeds and you are putting your money where your mouth is and you're making you're actually taking action on things that matter, like that's when things change. That's when you can change the game, not just for your business, but for the world. And, partners like the Pistons, Danielle and her team, like I mentioned, we've gotten really creative with what we've done together as a hometown partner. Doing things like being in the mix of She Won 3 night, and those types of things that didn't exist years ago, but now exist because we have, women and men at the table, and we have this new way of thinking about deeds over words, and that's really where a lot of our sponsorship activation is rooted in. Even when we thought about what we wanted to tackle with a partner like Hendrick Motorsports, I talked a little bit about how they were sort of our first big sponsorship partner. Our whole strategy was centered around how do we disrupt the traditional meaning of sponsorship in motorsports, and that's kind of where we took off, and it's sort of been our foundation ever since.
I love all of this and just the authenticity and the thought that goes into these of not just creating something to put a logo on, but something that matters at the end of the day.
Well, and then to have partners that mirror your values, mirror what you fundamentally believe in is also incredibly important. So if your goals aren't aligned at the end of the day, like that partnership's not going to work. So you've got to align with partners. For us, it's partners that want to be disrupted, are ready for it, that want to change, are ready for it, that want to be inclusive, that want to make a difference in the world, that want to create equity. So those are all like really important characteristics for a partner of ours, and that's why it's been successful for us.
Incredible. All right. Can each of you share an example? I know we've heard a lot of different examples of great partnerships, but any other examples that you can share that you're really proud to have been a part of, have led, and why you feel like it was so successful?
Yeah, I'll jump in here because I want to kind of piggyback off of She Won 3. A couple of weeks ago, we just had a all-girls clinic, basketball clinic. And I think sometimes we don't think about, how hard it is to keep girls engaged in sports. I'm a former athlete. I started running track when I was 8 years old, ran all the way through college, but I also played softball. I forgot to tell you that.
Yeah, me too.
I also played softball and I played basketball. And for me, sports was such a big part of my life. And, to see that, we're losing some of the attention of these young girls, it kind of breaks my heart because you grow so much playing sports. There's so many skills that you can take into your adult life just from playing sports and learning how to work on a team. And so we had a all-girls clinic not too long ago that was sponsored by Ally. And the amount of girls that we had come out, the parents that were there, the coaches, that were just so awestruck about how hard it is to get the girls, but to have so many show up and that are really engaged and that really want to play basketball, it really warmed my heart. So I wanted to say that first. It was definitely one of my favorite projects to work on. But another one, before I even got to the Pistons, I think I had mentioned to you guys, I'm a former runner. I worked with Gymshark, and I worked with sponsored athletes. And so one of the athletes came to me when I first got there and said, I want to run across the country. Everyone that I've mentioned this to has either laughed at me or said, there's no way that you can do it. Now, being a former, do we have any former athletes in the room? So when someone tells you that you can't do something, what do? You usually end up doing it, correct? So I basically had this same conversation with them, and I said, you know what? I said, we're going to get you across the country. So what did we do? I went back to the brand, had some conversations, put together kind of like a proposal about why this would be great, brand awareness, running through different states across the country. And we wrapped an RV with branding. We had a whole brand campaign about it. And he ran across the country. It took him 84 days, over 3,000 miles, and he ran across the country from California to New York City. So that was probably my favorite project because someone told him he couldn't do it, and we showed them that he could. But also the impact that we made on just the different states that he stopped in, on people that, probably were never runners, but were inspired by his journey.
I love the inspirational change there of through young athletes that are female, that are they're competitive and they're ready to go there, but also for that individual too, and the impact that has on the community and all the different individuals that see that touch point, that's powerful. What about
No, it's tough because young girls, I mean, like 60% of young girls drop out of sports before they're 14, and it's for a myriad of reasons. I think we've all got to kind of figure out how we change. I think for me, one of the most proud moments was not just aligning with the NWSL, but when we aligned with them, it was the first year we were a partner, and all of the turmoil kind of broke loose. All of the scandals came out. There was a lot of verbal, mental, sexual abuse happening within the league. And it was tough because a lot of sponsors were running away. And that is not what the league needed. The league needed to be sustained because these athletes weren't going to have anywhere to play. So you think about that, like from a women's sports angle, there already wasn't enough opportunity for women athletes to be able to play professionally, and now here you are in this league that is really going through it, and all of the money that's invested in them are pulling out. And that was a really scary time. And so we kind of looked at each other. We're like, we can't pull out. We got to double down, actually. So what we ended up doing was aligning with the NWSL Players Association. And that gave us an opportunity to listen to the players directly. It gave us an opportunity to hear from them what is happening, what is it that they need, what is the root of the problem, so we could understand that from a brand perspective, from a human perspective. And it influenced every single moment that we've had with the NWSL since. And, here we are 3 years later, and it's going so incredibly well. It's super strong. I think we've made, obviously, a huge dent in media equity. Just for us personally, we've closed that gap we've increased our media spend 400% in women's sports over the last 2 years. But you're starting to see the faces of the coaches changing, and the security of the teams changing, and all of those systemic issues that have really plagued, women's sports for a really long time are really starting to change. And I think that's because of the power of the athlete. And I think that was probably one of the first things that I remember being so special in women's sports was really sitting down and being proud of doubling down in a moment when nobody else wanted to.
Incredible. And overall, we've talked about a lot of the trailblazing efforts that you've been a part of and led to just more standard practices and the ways that you approach these. But can you share anything that really excites you that you're working on for the future of this industry or the projects that you have?
I can start. I know we're talking a lot about sports, and I think this goes hand in hand, but if you think about the media landscape today and just how fragmented it is, and how even to try to find, an NWSL game used to be, you'd go to CBS, and now you got to go to like 5 different media partners. It's crazy, but it's like that for every single sport. And for me, it's like, how do you start to get creative and break through in some of that? And so I think what I'm the most excited about is sort of the ability to be more brave in marketing, and do really meaningful things. We've actually been working through some really unique partnerships outside of sports with partners like a Hello Sunshine and Roku, where we're able to sort of co-create a mini series of sorts, where we're helping women entrepreneurs make their side hustle their main hustle. And it's this idea of integrating our brand and our purpose and who we are through the lens of financial education into these really unique media opportunities. And so I think about the applicability of that into the sports space, and that makes me really excited. I think the other thing is technology and just this new age of whether it's AI or whether it's digital connections or whatever it is. What is that going to look like, and how is that going to shape sports, and how is that going to shape the industry? How is it going to change it? How is it going to make it better? What are some of the things that we're going to learn along the way that I think we're just going to have to figure out how we overcome? But those are all things that I think excite me about what's next.
I would be remiss to not jump in there of like digital and education and confidence building there. Like working for EVERFI, I feel really, really honored to be able to have a unique approach to bring brands in front of students, especially in K-12 spaces, to empower them of things that really will influence the rest of their lives, like financial literacy, character development, just a myriad of topics there. And that's just really inspirational to think about the power of education and what that can do for the future. But go ahead, yeah.
I think I'm going to marry both of the ideas that you both had, and I think by now you guys have a passion for the youth too. So being able to bring out and pull out that creativity and see, you know, Gen Z. I don't know if you guys have had some interactions with Gen Z, but they're here, yeah, they're here. But the ideas and the creativity and some of their perspective that they bring to the table, I'm really, really excited to see how they bring that to the sports industry and how we're able to leverage that with partnerships and bringing new ideas, new programs together, and kind of just allowing their minds to like run free. But what can we do to expand our brand, but also what can we do to kind of like amplify different activations that we do, like, you know, with Ally. Like, how can we get creative? Like, the sky's the limit, so I'm really looking forward to seeing that in the future, and also pushing them to pull all of those creative juices and get them flowing, and kind of encouraging them to do that. So I'm definitely looking forward to that.
The next generation of innovation, 100%. Well, I think that's our time. We have 5 more minutes. Overall, we can keep going here and just kind of dive into more of the projects that you've worked on. Can you elaborate on any other, I know Ally Challenge is another great initiative. You have all these great relationships. The She Won 3 night, I know I've heard so many great tidbits, and just without being super, super close with the work that you've done, can we hear more about that?
Yeah, sure. So every month, or I shouldn't say every month, in the month of March, it's Women's Empowerment Month. And so by partnering with Ally, having, you know, the same mind, the same like ideas, we wanted to make sure that we could really amplify women's empowerment through sport. And so obviously through the game of basketball. And so on that night, we really tailored the game presentation to be directed towards women and allies. And so, no pun intended, but women and allies. And so from the minute you come into the door, you know, we're greeting women with a gift, an empowering message. Everything that you see on the concourse is tailored towards women's empowerment, kind of being your authentic self. And obviously, like, the messaging changes, you know, every year, but that's the main focus. During that month, you know, like, we also recognize some women that have nonprofits. And so, you know, like, we want to make sure that we're recognizing them, empowering them to keep going, you know, keep fighting, keep growing your business. And so we want to highlight them, and we do that during that month as well. And we don't forget about our youngins. And so we have the Girls Dream Big Summit. And so we partner with other nonprofits to come and sit down and kind of talk to the girls about what they want to do, kind of start shaping their mind about what ideas or just what they can do in the industry. It doesn't necessarily have to be sport, but whatever they have a passion for. And then we also include a basketball clinic. So we include an activity that's a part of it, so that they can still get that full 360 of, you know, just being empowered by women. We have women leaders that are there, we have women coaches, and we really want to empower them to be their best self and always bring that to the table. And so I think that's just kind of like a quick snippet. I hope I did okay, Alicia. But yeah, so it's I love it, you know, just calling attention to, you know, just being a woman and feeling great about who you are and what you bring to the table. And we love that the Pistons support that and Ally.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Let's go, yeah. For the recording.
All right. I have a question for Bridget. You talked about your relationship with the National Women's Soccer League. How did you determine which women's sports you will get involved in? And how has the commitment to invest the same amount of media in women's sports, has your team been consistent in that? Have you been able to follow through on those commitments? But just give me a little background on why soccer and what happens thereafter.
Yeah, and I'll hit on the word consistent, because that is the key word. It's investing in women's sports. You have to be consistent. You can't come in and out. The fans will know, and it's completely inauthentic. You have to be consistent. So that's part of it. The National Women's Soccer League. Soccer was sort of our first foray into sponsorships, period. It was at the time, I mean, when we started looking at sponsorships 2015-ish, fastest growing sport in the United States. So already we were starting to dip our toe into it a little bit. What's really tricky about women's sports is there was not a lot of opportunity to invest in women's sports because historically, women's sports was sold as sort of like an additive to men's sports, so added value to kind of make up for impressions and things like that. So big banks, especially like in the financial category, we were really limited to what was available. So a little bit is the available inventory. The other piece of it is, does it align with your objectives in terms of what you want to do and what you're looking to make changes in? So National Women's Soccer League kind of became that opportunity at that right point in time. Of course, it was COVID, so it was a totally different, time of year where a lot of sponsors were pulling out. I like to say the stars aligned. We got into it that way. We continue to struggle with opportunities to align with different leagues or teams. You've noticed we just signed a new partnership with the Las Vegas Aces, which is massive for us. It's working extremely hard for us. Those guys are amazing. But that's been tricky to kind of figure out like what's the right balance between teams and leagues, and they do very, very different things. And so we have to look at that across our whole portfolio and make those determinations. From a media standpoint, we've run into a lot of challenges. It's been a lot of off-peak time slots that we were running into, so you weren't getting like the reach and you weren't getting the return that you needed. We ran into a lot of challenges where media companies wouldn't sell women's sports. They would just sell either sports or men's sports, and they'd sprinkle in the women. We didn't even know where our dollars were going. So that was another challenge. One of the ways we actually thought about overcoming that, and that's where I kind of talk about disruption a little bit, is we aligned with the Atlantic Coast Conference, and through Disney, they were able to help us direct 90% of our investment in that initiative into women's sports. So 90% of our media dollars went directly into women's sports. We knew where they were going. So trying to think about disruptive ways to do things like that was important. Working with CBS side by side to get the NWSL championship game moved to prime time. That changed the game for us. So, those are the types of things we just had to get really scrappy and really creative to overcome a lot of that systemic, cyclical, challenges that we've gotten into. And, I think what we're seeing now is the door is opening. More and more women's sports are, in time slots that you would want to buy prime time, whatever that looks like. And more and more media companies are picking up the rights to it. So you're seeing a lot of that media landscape shifting too. So we're seeing a lot of indication that it's changing and the viewership is going up, and that's what we need to break the cycle.
Thank you.